Hey everyone, and welcome back to Sasquatch Theory. Tonight's episode takes us deep into Kentucky, along the banks of the Green River, where a young boy named Ray Howard experienced something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Growing up on his grandparents' farm, Ray began noticing a massive bipedal creature moving through the tree line, silent, fast, and unlike anything he could explain. But what started as distant sightings quickly turned into something far more personal. In 1975, after being thrown from a horse and left injured in a briar thicket, Ray came face to face with what he believes was a female Sasquatch. This is truly a phenomenal story and one of many where people claim to have been saved by a Sasquatch. Ray previously shared his Bigfoot encounter on the Bigfoot Society, and you guys should totally check it out, but he claims that he shared more information on my podcast and a lot more detail, so you won't be getting the same story twice, and there is a twist at the end that he's never shared with anyone before. If you have a Bigfoot encounter that you would like to get off your chest, feel free to reach out sometime at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. You can join the membership today for additional content. It really helps support the channel and the research being done out in the field. With all that being said, let's dive straight into this amazing Bigfoot encounter from the state of Kentucky. All right, Ray, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
Doing good, Miguel. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. Ray, if you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your experiences from the very beginning, please.
Well, Miguel, thank you so much for having me on your show. I appreciate it very much. And I say to God be the glory for this, and may he just bless this show, and may he bless that your work that continues to keep going forward and all that you have. My name is Ray Howard. I'm 50, will be 58 years old this next month. And I was born in Detroit, Michigan. At the age of 4, I was sent by my parents because of a situation that had happened in Detroit. For my safety, they sent me to Zion, Kentucky, and up there in Zion, Hebersville, Kentucky. Many of you that may not know what that place is or have heard of it, if you've ever heard of Barton Nunley, talking about the Spotsville Monster. Now, that's a very well-known and famous place. I was right across the river from him. Now, for the backstory, I did not know Barton Nunley back in them days. But the strangest thing, Barton Nunley and his family had their Bigfoot experience and all that went on, which sounded like it was very horrifying, back in 1975. In that same year is when I had my experience. I had not talked to Barton Nunley and them up until this last year, which it was really something to share those stories back and forth. And he said he wished he had known all these years that someone was across the river that had those, because it would have strengthened their story, because there was so much doubt and unbelief. And this is why I really do these interviews, is because people really need to hear the truth. I've always said that if somebody has the need for attention or something and just gets on something like this and makes up something, I just totally lose respect for people like that. I think they should find something in life to fill that area. But this story, I will rest assure you and promise you that every tidbit of it is the 100% truth. And I'm going to lay it out there to you. So I lived with my grandparents starting at the age of 4. And we were there on the farm. We lived right across from the Green River. My bedroom was in the front room, which faced the road. And right there at the road, when you looked across the road, there was the Green River. I could lay in my front bed and I could see the river barges coming down the river. That's how close we were. There was even times that when the leaves on the trees wasn't so thick and they were falling off, that the people on the barge coming down the river there, the boat captains would see me in the window. This is how close I was to the Green River. And I could grab my hand, stick it in the air and pull down, meaning blow your horn on your boat. And they would do that. And it was just so neat. But down in that area, every once in a while, I would see something huge, something dark, and it was bipedal. And at that point, that was a distance for me. But what I did see is probably the limit of that. But let me tell you this, whatever that was, it wasn't no ape. And this thing, it walked faster than any human I had ever seen in my entire life. Now, this sort of was the start of some of the things I started to see concerning Sasquatch. And but the real experience that I had, Miguel, it was beyond anything I'd ever heard or seen. Now, I want to say this to you: we were so country. We were farmers and etc. But my grandpa still held a job in Gamco there right there in Henderson, Kentucky. He was the head foreman there, but he still did farming back there we were at with all the acreage. And one day, it was a weekend, it was on a Saturday back in 1975, in and up and around the month of August. I never forgot, my grandfather had lots of farm animals. He raised pigs, he raised cattle, chickens, had some dogs. We had pretty much what the normal farm would have. And he had a few horses. Well, one day I remember, and this was when I was 7 years old. So, like I said, that was back in 1975. There came a horse trailer, unknown, I'd never seen it before, come riding in into the farm. And of course, me being a kid, I come out running out of the house and ran up to see what was going on. And of course, I could, because of the horse trailer, the way it was made, some of them are closed, and some of them are open. And this one was open, and I was able to look through and see this very beautiful Palomino-looking horse. And my grandfather came out, and my grandmother and my uncle, and they talked to the guy, and well, they had a little small talk, and the next thing I know, there was a cash transaction, and then they unloaded the horse. And so my grandfather and them went and got some horse brushes and some apples. And they decided to brush him and to make friends with him, basically, and started cutting some apples into. We had these big, huge granny apples, and they was cutting these apples and they was feeding the horse. Well, I really wanted to ride this horse. And I mean, I did everything that I could do to talk to my grandfather into setting me up on the horse. He said, I don't know about riding. He says, because he says, we know from the owner, he's very, very friendly and there's no problems with him. But he says, I'm not going to let you ride him, but I'll let you sit on him while we're here around him. So, okay, that's good enough for me. Well, I was sitting up on the back of him, and I had a hold of his hair, and I was talking to my grandfather and them, and then there was a neighbor that we had, and it doesn't bother me to tell the first name. He's dead a long time ago, but his name, they went by the name of Riddle. That was their last name, and that's what we called him. Actually, we called him Mr. Riddle. Back then, I'd say he's 60 or in his 70s. He happened to be coming down the road earlier in the day. He had an old red Ford pickup truck, one of the very older ones, almost looked like the old Sanford and Son type of truck. It was so old. And it had died right in front of our house out there. Like I told you, it'd be in between the Green River and the house that we were in. And so it's sitting there. Well, just so happened to be by the time he had went down the road and got his sons to come back to help him try to get this thing going, that was about the time I was sitting up on this old horse. Well, they went to start, I don't know, they were playing with the carburetor or something out there. At least that's what my grandfather told me, because I was too young to understand that stuff. And what I think they did was they overflooded the carburetor. This was the old carburetor. When they did, they went to start this thing, and I mean, it gave out one of the loudest backfires you had ever heard in your entire life. It sounded like a double barrel shotgun being shot all at once. It sounded like it was one your single barrel. It was that loud. When this happened, Miguel, this horse, thank God, he reared just a little bit, his front feet, not enough to throw me off. I held on to his hair there, but he took off running, broke loose from my grandfather, my uncle, and my grandmother. Took off. Now, my grandfather had back there, he had 33 acres of land. This horse took off running at a full speed. Miguel, I have never been so scared in all of my life. I had only been babied when it come to horses in the past, and my grandfather was very limited. He was very protective, and he never would let me ride a horse by myself. He would always put me up on it and then lead it by the leash there, and just, take me for a walk and bring me back. But this was something to, oh my. Fear went through me like I had never felt in my life. This horse took off back towards that back acreage of the 33 acres. And back in there in that place, there's a big pond. It was a man-made pond my grandfather had dug out with a backhoe. And he stacked it full of catfish, big catfish. Actually, what he did was he was catching the fish out of the Green River up front, and he was putting them back there. And he had a lot of nice fish. Well, we come running past this pond here. Well, right when you get past the pond was the end of the 33 acres, and there was a huge barbed wire, the old barbed wire fence, where it was like 3 strands, one on top, one in the middle, and the bottom. And this horse ran until that barbed wire fence ended, and he come at a halt like nothing you'd ever seen. Best brakes you ever seen on anything. But the problem was, we were running at such a speed, and then he come to a stop so quick. He threw me, and I went straight over this fence. And Miguel, there was the biggest briar bush or sticker bush, wherever you want to call it, on the other side waiting for me. When that horse throwed me, I went straight into that briar bush. I was just tore up. I was crying, and it was miserable. I was scared from the thing with the horse and what had happened, from it taking off, and then from just everything. I was just literally traumatized. Well, in the middle of, I remembered I was setting, I wasn't standing, I was setting after I'd loosened myself just a little bit to where the stickers weren't sticking in me, but yet I was still, had them surrounded me. But I was just sitting there in setting position and crying. I had noticed on the other side of that fence where I was at, there was a small tree line. This was not a thick patch of woods. It was just a small patch, and on the tree line of it, I started noticing when I looked back this very, very tall creature. Again, as I had spoken in the beginning of this interview here, it was just like the one I had seen bipedal that was down on the Green River. And that thing back then, I think, was looking for fish. I don't know, maybe deer or something, but this thing was hunting when I seen it. I know it was. I've seen a couple times where it had something in its hands. As I assumed that might have been a dead animal it had. I don't know. But this one come up out of this tree line and it started walking towards me. Again, we didn't even own a TV, so I couldn't have told you what a Bigfoot was. I could tell you everything at the age of 7 about what that thing looked like with detail, but I had never seen anything like this other than me telling you what I'd seen in a distance. But seeing something like this up close is a whole different story. Well, this thing kept walking, and it was quick. It heard me crying. It didn't come running, but it come at a stride. You might as well consider it running. The closer it got, I realized this was a female because of the breast. This thing was about 7 foot tall. Could have been 8, but I'd say it'd been more around the 7.5 at the best. And how do I size that? I'm going to tell you, it's interesting. A lot of people that knew anything about the wrestling world, that knew Andre the Giant, I don't know if you've ever heard of him or remembered him, but when I was a kid, I got a very big blessing from the family. And in Evansville, Indiana, I got me a special ride and got to go to the Evansville Coliseum and was able to meet Andre the Giant. And for many of you that don't remember him or remember much about him, he was one of the biggest in the world still today. But back then in Evansville, Indiana, he bent down on both knees. He put 4 children on one arm, let them sit on his arm in his hand, put 4 children on the other, and then he stood up in the air and he lifted all 8 of them up. One of those children were me. I got one of the biggest birthday wishes and blessings you had ever seen in your life. Now, anybody that knows the height of Andre knows it was like 7 foot something. That was the exact height that this creature stood. This is how I knew the size. I didn't know it by any other way. And this female, she was more reddish in color in the front part of her. The back side of her was jet black. You could tell right around in the shoulder looking area, coming around to the front is kind of where the red started. And then it just got real red in the front. I'll try to be careful with this part here. The breast were sagging, and she had some gray in her hair. This is how I could tell this was an older Bigfoot. Didn't really have a neck. I mean, the shoulders and the neck kind of sort of, that was it. You could tell she couldn't really twist her head back and forth like a normal person. The face, I can only describe this way. This thing had a leathery looking type of face, but human. It was as about as human looking as anything you could ever imagine. Even your regular apes that you see on TV and all, you could, depending on the person that's telling the story of what they see and what they think. But I can tell you, I've been to many zoos. This thing had more of a humanistic look than anything I'd ever seen. Now, the nose would have been the only thing that could have given away the apish part when it come to this. The nose was just a little flared out, but the rest of it, it had this huge forehead, and it had that conical, I think this is the right word, conical look on the head. But the eyes were very deep, set back into the head. She came up, stood about 5 foot in front of me. She squatted down, put both hands out as if to say, "It's okay. I want to help you." She didn't say that, "I want to help you." She just, you could tell it's okay by her gestures. Now, Miguel, this is where it gets interesting. From that day, I noticed something very strange, and I'll get more back into this story. But when she did that gesture, the strangest thing I'd ever seen from my young 7-year-old age happened to me that day. I could literally hear this Bigfoot speak to me in my head. And when she spoke, she says, "Don't be afraid." She says, "I'm not here to hurt you. I only want to help you get out of this place that you're in over here." And I had such a peace that came over me that I don't, there's just no way to explain this. Now, as I've gotten older, I've thought about this story, I bet almost every day. And another reason to come on the podcast and to tell the story, I got to be honest, it's therapeutic, because this type of a thing doesn't just go away. It sticks with you for life. It marks you, and you can't forget it. Now, was my experience traumatizing with the Bigfoot? No. But everything that led up to it and the experience, there was trauma leading to it that what got me in that place. But the shock of my life meeting that Bigfoot, it's like sometimes you just feel like there's days you just got to get this out of you, and it just builds up. And this is why coming on the podcast helps. It's therapeutic to me, and it's very, very good for people to know the truth of what we really have out there. Well, back to what I was telling you there. I heard her literally inside of my head, and I've heard stories before but didn't never know this until I got probably at the age of 55, that I've heard that other people had that sort of same experience, that they could hear these things talk in their head. I don't think I've heard a ton of stories like that, but I've heard them. Well, she basically just told me, it's okay. I'm assuring you, I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to help you come out of that place that you're in, meaning that middle of that sticker bush. Well, she kept in that position with her hands open, as if to say, let me help you. But Miguel, even though I had peace, even though I felt she was safe, I still refused to put my hands out and allow her to pull me out of the bush. But I did have a very long look. I would say my experience with her before the departure, I'd say I had a good solid 5 to 7 minutes to look at her and to listen to whatever thoughts came through. And I mean, it was for 7 years old, and here, and I'm, like I said, getting ready to turn 58. You would think that at that time of your life, and between then and now, and all these years, 50 something years has passed, you would think that, well, you done forgot about this, or some of us by now. No, sir. Let me tell you something. If you ever meet something like that face to face, I don't care how old you are, you will never forget that thing. Never. The the huge, this thing being so huge, so different than anything that us as humans have ever seen or experienced. It just marks you. You can't forget it. It stays with you and it will never leave you. Um, I I remember taking time and just listening, and I had actually stopped crying when I heard those thoughts. That's when the peace came in. And I thought, man, I'm not even crying no more. I thought about that. I thought about that at that very moment. I'm not crying no more. And the next thing I had, oh, in the feet. That was the weirdest looking feet I'd ever seen in my life. The big toe, and then you got your other 4 toes over to the left there. The big toe was very separated. There was a lot of distance, and it was very funny shape. But however, it didn't take away from, the fact that when you see some of these footprints and stuff that people show and make prints of, it 100% went with one of those. But the shape of those feet just was something you never forget. Um, I'm just trying to think if there's some details I might have missed here. Um, the hands, I mean, were huge. Um, so around that time, I heard 2 people yelling my name. Now, mind you, back there on the farm, back at the house, and where our corn crib was, when that horse took off, he had way a head start. And my grandfather and my uncle had, from that point, the only way they could get to me was because there was no vehicle that would have made it back through this terrain, or not back then, because they didn't have what you call 4-wheelers and all that stuff then. I mean, them things might have been existing, but I'm saying my grandparents didn't have them. And they had to go into the barn and unhook the other horses and saddle them quickly and get on them and get down the field so they could find me. Well, like I said, that's between that 5 and 7 minute frame that I had of setting with this Bigfoot. And never once was she intimidating. Never once did she move quickly or try to scare me. I want to say this. When I looked into this animal or this creature's eyes, I seen nothing but intelligence. And brother, I am not kidding you, still to this day. I have still to this day can tell you, I can see people and I have a very, very profound discernment. I can usually read a person within minutes. I can usually tell you a lot about what they've been through and what they're going through at the moment. And that's how profound God's given me for a discernment. And by looking into that animal's eyes, this thing had an intelligence that went way beyond the normal. This was not an animal intelligence. This, I don't know what you would call it, but this was an intelligence that even went beyond what us as humans have in areas. Very, very, you could see had a very great, the instinct this animal had was great. And before my grandfather and my uncle, before I heard their name, heard them calling my name, sorry, before I could hear them, I watched and paid attention to one thing. I seen her nose. She started sniffing. And I seen her nose open and close. And then I seen her move her whole body a little bit to the left and then just slightly to the right. And I thought, I wonder what she's doing. What she was doing, brother, she had sniffed them out before they got to us. Before they ever yelled my name, she had already smelled them. This is what I know I pay close attention to, because right after she did that, it couldn't have been 30 seconds. This is when I heard my grandfather and uncle yell my name. They started coming down the field. They were at a pretty good distance about the first time they yelled. Well, instinctively, she knew that her time was limited. I personally will say this to you. If this animal had had any reason whatsoever to have wanted to hurt me or had any sort of bad intention, trust me, she would have snatched me up without my consent and had done been gone in that 7 minutes. But that is not what happened. When she heard them yell my name after smelling them, she gently stood up, and boy, was she was huge. And then she started to walk back towards the tree line. And to me, again, I'll repeat that. What we consider walking is running to them. I mean, not running to them, running to us, but walking to them. And I mean, she did not take no time to get from point A to point B. Well, this is what she did, Miguel. She walked back to that same tree line as to where she came out of. And she stood behind these two bigger trees and was looking out and watching me, watching over me. By that time, I'd say probably within a minute or so, my grandfather, my uncle had came. The way they knew basically where I was, this was a weird thing. but it was true. That horse that had carried me that far and that had thrown me, for some reason, did not leave that area. Now, mind you, she walked a little bit down the way of the fence when the Bigfoot showed up. I think she smelled that and she didn't like that, but she didn't go far though. And again, I don't know if the horse I've heard they run and everything. I've heard cattle and everything when these Bigfoot show up, they just scatter. But this horse only walked just enough to basically feel like he was safe, but he didn't take off at a very long distance. Now, when the Bigfoot went back and got behind the trees, this horse started edging a little bit back and almost dead center to where I was. I can't explain these things. I can only tell you this. That day I learned more about the instinct of animals, Bigfoots and everything than I'd ever learned in my life. But this animal came back and stood almost dead center as if she was there showing my grandfather and my uncle, he's right here. Just follow me. Well, when they got up there, they knew exactly where I was. They got off those horses, come running, had to climb the fence. My grandfather wouldn't have believed that, but my grandfather climbed this fence and got over it before my young uncle. And he found me, he pulled me up out of those bushes, and he threw me over his shoulder, and he was scared to death and crying. I had never in all of the years of my life, and I'm not speaking bad of my grandfather here on this, but I had never in all the days of my life seen my grandfather show a tear, not even with the death of people. But that day, I seen for the first, and it was the last time I had seen a tear ever come out of his face. Now, he was an old mountain man from the mountains of Hazard, Kentucky. And anybody that knows anything about that, those were not the type of people you messed with. They set up on the porches with shotguns, and they didn't put up with no foolishness. Anybody come along that want to give a mess, they were ready to fight. That's the type of back life that he come from. And so that's why I'd only seen so little emotion from them, because they had lived a hard life and they understood. And so he threw me over his shoulder. He carried me over. My uncle was standing on their side fence, and he handed me over the fence so that I wouldn't scrape myself or anything. And my uncle took me, and when my grandfather crossed back over the fence, and he got back up on his horse, and he told my uncle, he said, he had another leash there, and he said take this horse, talking about the one that rode me down there. He said, take this one back. He says, I'm going to put Ray up on the back of my horse, and I'm going to carry him home with me. Well, I watched. Now, my uncle had went ahead of us. I watched, so I was the one on the very back of all of these. And I looked back to the tree line. And I want you to know she had came out from the tree line just enough to where she could see me. She watched, and even came a little bit more forward the further we got ahead, and almost stood at that barbed wire fence. Now, I couldn't see what I'm going to tell you, but because of the distance, it appeared, and I'm not kidding, it appeared almost as if she had grabbed a hold of that barbed wire fence with her hands and was holding on and just looking ahead. Because she stood there and watched until we were out of sight. What was all this about me, Gail? I can't tell you other than it appeared to me that there was a creature that we hear a lot about. And as I said to you earlier, just right across the river, Bart and Unley's family was terrorized by a Bigfoot, but their experience was way beyond anything most would ever understood. They were terrorized. They had shotguns. They had to sit on top of their houses. This thing tried to beat in their doors and killed all their animals and etc. This was the whole opposite experience of what I had. I still today question that. Why would something like this be this way? Well, I think it was Barton only. It could have been another one, but no, it was Jeremiah Johnson. I don't know if it's Johnson Byron. I don't remember, but Jeremiah had told me when I brought that up. He said, "I'll tell you what I think," and I said, "Okay." He said, "Why some people have a good experience and why some don't." He says, "I've heard all around." He said, "Bigfoots are just like human beings. You've got the good and you've got the bad in every batch." He said, "But imagine what I'm going to tell you." He says, "Imagine maybe a week or a day before you go into a forest and a Bigfoot meets up with some hunters and they shoot at it." He said, "Now let's ask ourselves technically about that." He said, "Look, if you were shot at and if you had some youth, meaning children, and you had a Bigfoot wife or whatever, and you're there to protect them as the head of the family, and people come shooting at you and your family." He said, "Do you think that you're going to be very friendly with people after that?" I said, "Brother," I said, "Jeremiah," I said, that makes all the sense in the world." He said, "Yeah." He said, "A lot of people don't see that." He said, "But apparently with what you went through," he says, "this Bigfoot, it sounds to me, was very peaceful and gentle to begin with, but she also recognized how young you were and that you, to her, were a baby. And her instincts were to help." He said, "That's the only explanation I can give you, brother." And he said, "But I can't tell you that's 100% right either." He says, "But it's the only thing that makes sense to me." And I said, I've got a little wisdom now. I said, I didn't ever thought about that, but that way. Well, um, so I never told my grandparents nor my uncle the story. A lot of people said, "Well, why?" I'll tell you why. Because on the weekends, my grandfather and my uncle and a lot of my other uncles and family members, the men, would get together and we would target practice. We would shoot. My my grandfather had, and I would not joke you when I say this. My grandfather had an armory of weapons. He had every type that was legal, of course. He had every type of legal military rifle, pistol, everything you could imagine, and enough ammo. He could have started a small war. And we would all get together, and even at the age of 5, Miguel, they they had me shooting high-powered rifles, and I mean, some of those would kick and just really bruise my shoulder. And my grandmother was so upset about it. And my grandfather said, "Nope, one day he's going to have to either serve in the military or something, but he's not going to fear, and he's going to be able to handle anything that he puts in his hands." Was very true, because I did end up in the military, into the place that we would call Desert Storm. All right. Now, going back here, the the other story, if I may go forward with, was the pond that I mentioned to you guys, the man-made pond my grandfather had dug out there. Well, and in the same year, before winter got there or anything, but while we still had summertime and everything going on, my uncle one day was told by my grandfather, he said, take Ray. He said, go back here in the field. He said, take a roll of this barbed wire, he said, and repair the fence back there up there near the pond up on the hill. He said, repair the fence areas that have been torn down. The post rot and etc. You have to fix that stuff all the time. And so he took a big roll of this barbed wire fence, and he went back there with me and brought me an inner tube so I could play on the pond while he would be up on the hill to prepare this barbed wire fence. Now, he was a bit of out of sight, but he was not far out of sight. Let's say it that way. He would peek his head. He would come up, stand top the hill, and peek out to make sure I was okay, off and on. But Miguel, and I got out there in the middle of this pond. Now, the pond was very, very deep. I got out there in the middle of it, and I was on this old raft, rubber tubing, you know what I mean, like out of these big tractor wheels or whatever, maybe way back then. I think they had inner tubes. If it wasn't that, then it was from an old tractor, or old truck tire or something. But I was out there in the middle of the pond playing. The thing flipped upside down. I did not know how to swim. I don't think my grandparents even thought of this. When that thing flipped upside down, brother, I went underwater, and I don't remember if I was even going to see daylight after that, because I know I got a big mouthful of water, and I know I struggled. Well, I'm going to tell you something. Lo and behold, I felt something. It was a hand. Grabbed me by my shirt and started swiftly pulling me up to shore. Now, there back there at that pond was one of I don't remember what kind of tree this was, I'll be honest. I just remember this thing had white, and it had white all through the tree, but it was huge. This hand that I could not see or could not tell or any of the above swiftly was dragging me through this water, lifted me up and onto the very huge roots, because this tree had some of the biggest roots you had ever seen in your life, and they were exposed, meaning that the earth and the ground were not covering them no more, and they stood out into the water, and and then some. And this, wherever this hand, or whatever this hand was, lifted me up out of the water and laid me up on the roots. And then these roots were huge. Laid me up on the roots of this tree to where I was out of the water and in the safe. Now, me gagging and choking up water, and thank God I didn't drown. But when I turned around, finally, I got enough sense to turn around to see. I thought it was my uncle. I thought he had came to rescue me. I turned around and looked behind me. I'm sorry, forgive me. Miguel, when I look back, there was that same Bigfoot coming up out of the other side of the pond, walking up out of the water, and went up the hill and was gone in a flash. I mean, a flash. She took no more time to look back, to do anything. She wanted to get out of there. Well, then I realized why. Because it couldn't have been but 15 seconds. I heard somebody yelling my name. It was my uncle on the other side of the pond, up on the hill. He seen the tube, the river raft tube out in the middle, but he seen me laying up on those roots of that tree, and he let out a cry that sounded like somebody had died, and come running down to the bottom of that pond, grabbed me off those roots and pulled me up to the shore, put me on his shoulder. He says, "That's it." He says, "This day's work's over." He said, "We're going home." He took me back. Well, again, I have never told these stories. And the reason I think I got off a little bit when I was talking about my grandfather and him shooting guns every weekend. The reason I never had told them about this female Bigfoot I had encounter with was because I knew deep down in my soul they would have killed this thing. They would have put a search party together. Now, whether it ever found her or not, I don't know. But they would have went on the hunt. And if they had seen her, they would have killed her. And to me, she was a friend. She wasn't an enemy. She wasn't trying to hurt nobody. And especially after that second event in the water, I really felt like that there was a bond there. I really felt like that, I put my faith and I put my trust in God and God alone. But I know this: God can use anything. He can use any animal, any creature, anything for his glory to help one that's in a position out. And this just happened to be one of those situations that, for whatever reason, this animal had bonded with me and watched over me through the years that I was there. I can tell you things that, that did happen on the farm over the years, and this pretty much will go with a lot of things you probably heard before. Through over the years, as I told you, my grandfather had a lot of animals on the farm there. Well, he had these pigs, swine, and he had built this fence. And what he did was, and I don't know if they do this today. I mean, I don't know why not if they don't, but this is how I remembered it being constructed. He took 3 or 4 electric wires and wrapped them from the top of these posts down to the very bottom, and put all of these jar lids. He would drill a hole in it. He would put these jar lids on these electric wires, more at the bottom than anything. And the reason for it was so those pigs couldn't escape, and had put electricity to this. And so if they touched those jar lids, which was filling in the gaps in the fence, then it just it hit the pig pretty good and keeping him in there. Well, over the years, we had some of the swine to come up missing. Now, one thing I'll say is this. One day we went out there, and my grandfather, I always got to go out there and help him, and we carried these buckets of what we call slop. And we would shut the electric fence off in the corn crib, which is where it was connected. And then we'd cross over the fence, carry that slop, and then we would fill these troughs filled with the food of that slop for those pigs. It was a daily thing. And one day, I watched my grandfather. He stopped dead in his tracks while he was in the middle of this hog pen. And I watched him with his finger, and he kept pointing at each and every one of them as if he was counting. And then I seen him put his hand up on his face as if he was thinking very, very hard about something. Then I seen him take his finger again, and he goes back to counting one more time. And I thought about it, and he says, he was quietly but lowly speaking to himself, but out loud to where I could hear him. He says, "We've got some pigs missing." And I said, I called him, my grandfather, I called him Poppy. And I said, "Poppy," I said, "Did you say we have some pigs missing?" He said, "Yes, son, we do." And I said, "How many, Poppy?" He said, "We got 2 missing." And he says, "They're babies." Babies, probably meaning, I don't know. They were probably 50, 60 pounds, I guess. And this is where my grandfather started paying attention to something. Right there in the middle of the pig pen. Anybody that knows that what I'm going to tell you here, you know this very well, especially if you've raised hogs. There was the pigs, always their area is usually pretty sloppy, pretty muddy. They keep it that way. They waller in that, got water in there, and they like wallering around in that stuff, and they keep it very muddy in there. Right in the middle of all of that, being muddy, was 2 huge prints of what looked like a man that had took his shoes off. But now, I'm going to tell you in this podcast, I don't have no evidence to prove anything. I was only 7 years old. There's just nothing. I didn't know anything about anything, but I could sure tell you the story and tell you I have the memory and detail of every bit of it. But these prints were so huge, it was unbelievable. My grandfather watched him. He went back up to the house, grabbed my uncle, and he brought him out there. And he started showing. Now, they measured this. But again, I don't know what they measured that at. I couldn't have told you 2 inches from 5 inches off of a measuring ruler. Now, I could tell you what 7 foot looked like because of Andre the Giant, but I couldn't have told you nothing about no ruler. But I know this. I watched my grandfather. He grabbed one end of it. My uncle grabbed the other end, and he pulled it out. And I heard him talking to my uncle. He said, "I ain't never seen no man with no foot like that." And my uncle just you should have seen the look on this man's face. He looked at my grandfather and he said, "What is this?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "But I'm going to tell you this." He said, "From this day forward, I don't want Ray back in that field ever." from this day forward by himself. He said, from this day forward, I'm going to tell you. He said, if he goes back there, he goes with you or me. He says, and we are to start carrying firearms every time we go back. He said, I don't like what I see here. He said, I don't want anyone to know what is going on here. He says, and hopefully this is the end of this. Well, I'd say over the next year, maybe 2 years, we did have a few more pigs go missing. Wasn't like a incredible amount, but I'm going to say this, Miguel, because I have to guess on this. I know there was 2 that day taken. I think over the time that I'd seen over the next year, 2 years, I'd say there's probably another 6 altogether that went missing. What was so crazy about it was I thought to myself to this later in years, how did the Bigfoot cross this highly electric fence and grab 2 pigs and cross back over without it shocking him? That's just a mystery to me today. Because I know he didn't go up in that corn crib and shut that electric. I mean, he could have, but I highly doubt that. He somehow, electricity or something didn't affect him. And he was able to do whatever she or whatever was able to do what they needed to do to cross over into this territory and get what they needed. Now, this one thing, I heard this, I cannot tell you. I'm not going to be giving you a correct number because this is just a guess. But over the years, Miguel, in the middle of the night, wasn't every night, here and there, I could hear what you would call howling sounds, and sounds that I think that the best way to put this is the way you had said something to me prior to the broadcast, that guttural sound like a woman was being murdered. This was a scream that just you will never forget as long as you live. I know my grandfather and my uncle and my grandmother several times would hear this, go outside and stand in our yard and listen, trying to figure out what in the world was going on. Is somebody hurt or what is happening? They take flashlights, but they would never, I knew this, they would never enter into the field area. They stayed on the grounds around the house, and they would never cross over into the area, but they would take high-powered, what they called back then, coal miners' lights, and that's what they were. They were coal miners' lights, and anybody that knows about the old coal miners' lights, those things were bright. And they'd shine that back in there, they'd never see anything. Now, one of the weirdest stories, and this was when I got older. I've never forgot this, Miguel. We went back, me and my uncle, it's just me and him one day. We went back into the field to go rabbit hunting. Now, we crossed over into territory of all the years that we had lived there, etc. We crossed over into territory we had never been into, meaning we actually, just saying it, went over into territory and got off the acreage of where we owned And we went up deeper into those woods. And I mean, anybody that knows anything about Kentucky, the ranges there is hilly, very hilly. And we got back in the further into the deep part of this woods, and we found some old gravestones. They were so old that a lot of the lettering was gone, but yet there were some that still had lettering that was very readable. There was a couple of them that was some old Civil War soldiers that had been buried there. And one of them was a private, and the other one was like a lieutenant or a corporal or something like that. It was someone with rank. They're guessing there was probably 15 tombstones, and it just appeared to me it was a family graveyard. But this thing had not been attended to for a very long time. So apparently the generations died off and never went back and attended to these. They were broken, and some of them were still standing and very old. A lot of them had mold and stuff growing off of them, of moss and stuff. And but when we walked a little bit past this graveyard, this is where I'll never forget. We smelled something so bad. Man, brother, I don't know if I've got a word for it. It just smelled bad. It had a cross smell of like a skunk and maybe a sulfur smell. And it was so bad, it caused you to vomit. We had to cover our noses, our faces. But the only thing that kept us there was we spotted something just a little bit ahead of us. When we went up there, it was a boneyard. And Miguel, anyone knows anything about these things, and I think that you might have talked about this once, but this was all old deer carcasses. And I do believe we did find a few foxes in there, but these bones look like they were older, and they look like they had been licked dry of something. They were stacked up in one area completely. This is not something that you would look at and think to yourself, well, an animal just come back here and died. Well, no, I don't think 15 or 20 carcasses of animals come back here and joined themselves and did that. Something had been feeding, and they made this their feeding place. Now, we never found those pig bones that from all the pigs that did go missing. All we found, though, was what I'd said, a lot of deer and probably a couple of foxes that was just thrown up on this little bitty mound where whatever was there eating was throwing all the bones together. My uncle looked at that, and then we had that smell going on. He looked up at me. I had never seen a look on anybody's face like this. I mean, yeah, considering the smell, that would give anybody a bad look. But the boneyard is what got him with the look. When he seen all of this, he looked up at me and he said, "Go." He said, "Go." I said, "What?" He said, "Go now. Let's get out of here." He said, "Something is not right here." He said, "I've never, as long as I've lived, I have never crossed anything like this in my life." He says, "Something abnormal is going on here. And he rushed me out of there. And when we got back to the house, he told my grandfather his story in the front bedroom there. The front bedroom, and was also considered our TV room. And my grandmother's bed was there, but they also had a couch in there and a lazy boy. This is a bigger room. And that's where we'd go when we'd join in and watch TV when we did get one. God, it was probably 7 years from the time that I told you about when we had zero. And we would enjoy watching in that room, but he went in there and he took my grandfather's side, told him that story. First words out of his mouth, he said, "That's it." He said, "Ray is to never, never go back in that field from this day forward." He said, we've seen things, we've seen those prints, those footprints, and we've seen the hogs missing. And he said, but that story, he said, that tops it off. He said, "Ray is to never go back there." He says, "I don't even mean with you or me." He said, "I think it's just safer. He stays here." He says, and he can help attend to the garden and attend to the corn when we bring them in on the combines, etc. He said, but he is not to go back in those fields ever. And from that day forward, until I actually got older, I never did get to go back there until I was adult enough and could make that decision. I'm sitting here trying to think. Well, Miguel, do you got any questions for me? Because I don't know if I've covered everything here for you, but I think I've got a lot out there.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of questions, and that was certainly an interesting series of encounters and experiences. And yeah, that creature, it almost sounds like your guardian angel, like it has watched you and imprinted on you specifically. I feel like it's been watching you for a long time, and when you were hurt, that creature came out of the deep to rescue you, and it had compassion for you. Why did you not trust the creature to pull you out of the briar bushes? Were you just, I know you said you weren't afraid, but was it just the unknown factor?
It was the unknown factor, yeah. And I know that's conflicting because I even said it myself. When I heard this thing speak to me, however you want to call that, but spiritually, or whatever, but in my head, I could hear that thing talking to me and telling me, "Don't be afraid. It's okay. I'm only here to help you out of this place that you're in," meaning, the sticker bush. But even though I had this overwhelming peace, there was still deep down in me what you said there, the unknown factor that I just felt like I didn't want to go to that next step. And so I sort of stayed still.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. And I definitely do feel like these creatures are connected to the old world. I don't know about the Nephilim, but they are giants. And
Yep.
the mind speak, the cloaking, the orbs, it all points back towards a supernatural creature. And just because something is supernatural, it doesn't mean that it won't need to eat food and have regular characteristics of a physical creature. But yeah, the mind speak, that definitely gets me. I hear that a lot on my channel. I've spoken to a lot of people on the channel and that I know personally that have experienced the same phenomenon, and it just makes me believe that they truly are something next level. And yeah.
Yep.
Do you feel like this creature, I don't know, like God allowed this creature to watch over you and save you? Because you did say that you're like a minister now. Do you feel like maybe this all ties into that?
This is where it's conflicting with me, and I think you probably get what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
I myself for years have tried to get understanding of what this really is and what it's about, and etc. Um, and Miguel, if I had to look at that biblically, and if I were to try to connect that to God's word and try to get understanding, I mean, I could bring forth the stories, when you looked in Genesis chapter 6, where it said that the fallen angels, and this is going to sound a little far-fetched for some people that don't know God or the Bible or anything, but I'm not here preaching. I'm just trying to answer that question. But in Genesis chapter 6, it's back then, it said that the fallen angels mated with the women upon earth, which begat what we call the giants, the Nephilim. Okay. I've heard other people, say other different things, like they would talk about Esau was a very hairy man. I've heard just all kinds of things. I really don't know. But deep down in me, I do believe they are some sort of hybrid, and I'll say why. I do feel that there is a mixture of human DNA and whatever it is they are, because over the years and the things that I've seen, they have absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, in many laboratories, and believe me, they had to go to the right laboratories that were not government tainted or touched, because most of those will try to hide the true results of things. But they have proven that when they've turned hair of these animals and whatever, DNA, and I think some of them might have even had just a little bit of blood and all that on it. But over time, the true labs, and listen, now this is not just one or two labs. We're talking about multiple labs that have absolutely returned the results back, said without a shadow of a doubt, this is a mixture of human DNA and some other type of an animal. And when you look at that, you can't help but think and wonder if that was a biblical type of thing. Okay. But then you would think to yourself, okay, if them things were demonic, like people say they are, the big question is, why would something so demonic want to help somebody? Why would something like that reach out to help a little child 2 times, undeniably? And I can't answer them questions. I hope that your viewers, after they see this podcast, I hope that honestly that they'll chime in and they'll tell what they think.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always interested in what other people's learned. I'm always open to learning. I can only say what I think, but I am not telling you this is factual. If I had to guess at this, if there is truth to that being some sort of a hybrid between a human and some sort of an animal of some type of species we don't know about, the question people, like I said, was like, why would this thing help you if it was demonic? Okay, but if that is true, you thinking about it, it had part human DNA, if people choose to believe this, and then it had that other. Okay, the only thing I can think is that the human side of it, the DNA part of it, was kicked in, and there was compassion that came through the human DNA part of it. The animalistic side of it just didn't show. I mean, it showed, yeah, physically, but in the emotional state, this thing showed the compassion of something that you would consider us as human beings would have done. And that's something that one of us as human beings, meaning a good human being, and well, there is both sides, but that's something a good human being would have done, would have reached out to have helped and saved a human being, especially a child. That's the only thing that I can give for what I think. And notice what I said, that's what I think. There's nothing factual here because I can't prove it no more than anybody else. But to come up with an answer,
Yeah.
that's all I could ever get.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with that. I don't think people will be able to come up with an answer. A lot of people demonize the Sasquatch and they say they're demons, they're evil. But I don't know. I kind of disagree. I've taken multiple stories where these things have saved people's lives, and I don't feel like a demon would do that. It would do anything it could to divide and destroy the family, and anything it can to hurt you guys. And yeah,
Yep.
this thing didn't do that. The only thing I can think of is maybe if they are the fallen ones or the Nephilim, maybe not all of them are bad and they're trying to redeem themselves and they were tricked by Satan. And
Yep.
I don't really know. I mean, like you said, no one really has an answer, but the Bible does say that there was a flood and there were giants in those days. And when the Bible says something, it may be short, but if you really look at it, there was so much time there. For example, like when Jesus went into the wilderness for 40 days, it just talks about instances with him and the devil, and it doesn't talk about every single day, all 40 days. There's a long time there. And yeah, with the flood, when it says there were giants and it just kind of moves on, that's a whole civilization, a lot of time that happened there. And we see evidence of that nowadays. But yeah, I'm not going to get into the whole religious part of it. I know a lot of people don't want to hear it, but when we talk about Bigfoot, it always leads back to the Bible, and I just can't help it. I'm not a people pleaser, so I can't avoid it. It's a topic that needs to be discussed because it all ties in some way or another. But yeah, let's get back to the encounter. And I thought the description of the foot was really interesting. How you said the big toe was separated from the rest of the toes. Do you feel like
Mhm.
that's possibly to grab onto things like when it climbs trees? What are your thoughts about that?
I don't know, but I do know that I've heard, and I mean, I've never seen this myself, but I've heard, and then I've seen, some footage, whether that footage was AI or whether it was true footage. And I don't think that everything is AI. I don't. I never will believe that. I do. I will, without a shadow of a doubt, only because of my experiences. Um, I believe there's some true footage that's out there, and that we seeing some of that almost every day that's being put out by some of these people doing documentaries. I've seen a lot where they caught these things in trees and hanging out, watching people, etc. Uh, I think that what you said there is very, very correct. Again, I don't can factually say it because I don't know for sure, but it's the only thing that makes sense to me is that the form of the way that is yes, I think it is so that they can. I mean, it's like those monkeys, but just a much, much bigger than any monkey could ever grow to stature or weight and etc. Um, Trust me, your silverback gorillas are pretty big, but they do not touch this. This thing, in my opinion, I don't know. I don't know the height of gorilla, the silverbacks, and I'm stating that here because I don't want people coming on here trying to quote me when I'm not sitting here at some computer looking at, statistics or heights on what those things get to or anything. But I can tell you, I've been to enough zoos that I know this. The, the, the Sasquatch is way bigger than any gorilla or any silverback that I've ever seen. They were way beyond this. I think that what you said there makes better sense than anything is that their feet serve as that purpose to be able to climb trees, climb mountainous ranges, and to get into places that most normal things could not get into. Um, I just see it for them as a very big benefit for them. Um, I don't know. I mean, I've heard that the bones in their feet are supposedly much different than ours, and there's something about they said that the bone structure is different, and they don't walk like we do, and etc. And I think it's all built into, like you said, equipped for them and their benefit to be able to get from one place to another, or to climb, or whatever it is they do to help benefit them to their advantage. I think that's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all a theory. Do you feel like the Sasquatch put the horse in a trance or produce infrasound on it? What are your thoughts about that?
I never, something, Miguel, you're the first person ever. And again, this is only second interview I've ever did. Okay. Um, but I have talked to other people though. I mean, not podcasts or anything. You're the second person to ever interview me. But I have, even though all the people I've talked to, and I've never been to these Bigfoot, um, these, what they call it, conferences or whatever and all that.
Mhm.
I've never been to one. I've been interested in it, but I've just never ventured to one. But my thought, is, ah, well, when I look back at that, and this being the first time I was asked this, I do. I do believe that. I do believe that because that horse did not act normal. He didn't, like I said, I've always heard, and I mean, and for anybody that's not seen your channel or has not looked at a lot of your material, I will tell you this: they need to. And when you went back in and made the killing fields, and that's something I recommend to a lot of your viewers to go watch. That was one of the best series I've ever seen. I learned so much that I never knew. And when you listened to that interview, and I don't remember the fellow's name, but when you listened to that interview that you did with this, I think farmer is what I got out of it. He talked, really a lot about that the animals always ran from one side of the property to the other, depending on where that Bigfoot was. But this is the whole opposite in a way of speaking. The horse only went a little bit of the way. He didn't run, but when the Bigfoot come up unseen, he walked slowly and gently down the fence line just enough to where I think he felt like he was safe, but for whatever reason, he did not leave complete sight of me, and he stood at the fence. He didn't try to graze on the grass. You're right. If I think back at this, it would have appeared as if he had been in some sort of a trance, because you don't see them that still, especially with something that's got a scent. Now, don't get me wrong. That's something we didn't talk about either. I did not smell that horrible scent, that foul smell a lot of people talks about. Not in that encounter, I didn't. Now, if this is something that they use as a defense system or whatever, then, so be it. But let me say this. If that's what that is, then to me they're using that to back people off. But this is one thing I will say is if they're able to control that, she did a pretty good job that day, because I did not smell that day. Not like when I went into that boneyard. Now that boneyard, there was something so foul and so sickening, it was almost to the point of vomiting. But when she came, I'm just telling you that I smelt more of that horse. And anybody that's been around horses knows what I'm saying. They don't smell bad, but they've got this animalistic smell. It's different than most. And she didn't even have any smell. I don't know if she was just controlling it, or I don't know if she had something going on different than the other Bigfoots that probably you hear about. But whatever it was, I did not smell that day. That was I didn't think about that, but I'm glad that I remembered to tell you that. Man, I don't know if I got off on your question there, Miguel. You go ahead.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And yeah, when people do Bigfoot research, we rely on testimonies as actual evidence. And I feel like police officers do the same when they're making reports. If multiple people say the same thing, that's evidence. And when you said the creature heard you crying and it came in, this proves that they're attracted to, let's say, women and children, especially when kids are playing out in the playground, or if they're crying. This thing had compassion for you, and it knew
Yeah,
you were in trouble.
yeah, 100%. And the day in the pond and me almost drowning, that there's no denying what I'll say her real intent was, because I know for a fact then
Yeah. And the
my
color,
life was saved. Yeah.
yeah, the color was really interesting too, how it was a reddish color, and on the back it was a jet black color. That reminds me of like a calico cat or something.
Yeah, you could tell like from the back, because like I said, it was really black in the back. But when it started getting up like around in the shoulder area, or like at the around the top of what you would consider shoulders, that's when you start seeing the hair color changing. And then the more you got into the front, that's when it was real drastic looking. And it was consistent with its color between the back and the front. Yeah, almost like you said, almost calico. But the only difference is that this was, from one side to the other, and there was not like, dark and then red, in one area. It was like all of the back was black and all of the front was red. And even the red had it had tints of the red, meaning from a darker to a lighter color of the red. But it was consistent, though. It was very consistent. Beautiful. I will say that that red, that red made this Bigfoot. I mean, you probably never hear anybody say this on your podcast, but that red actually made that animal beautiful. Believe it or not.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, they're beautiful creatures. They really are. And like you said, when you look into their eyes, you see nothing but intelligence.
yes, yes. That I'll never forget as long as I live on planet Earth. The intelligence factor. There, anyone that if they were to ever even have that type of a chance to be that close to one, and if for some reason they were able to get past the trauma or the fear of being in the presence or having that type of an encounter, if that's possible for them, I mean, it was for me, the one thing is that I know that without the fear and without the trauma, you're going to be able to pay more close attention to detail then. Because if you got all this emotional stuff going on, and this is with anything in life, you don't tend to pay attention to the details of anything. You're more focused on how do I get out of this? Where do I go? What, etc. But with that situation, I almost feel like I myself could. I don't feel like I was fully hypnotized by no mean. I don't even feel like I was controlled. But do I know that goes beyond a shadow of a doubt that she spoke to me um, without audible voice? Oh yeah, I'm going to tell you right here. There's no denying that one. Now, something I have not told Miguel. I have been to different woods. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not one of these mountain hikers or any of the above, but I love the outdoors and I love going to woody areas and parks and stuff and parking my car and walking in. I love nature, but I'm going to tell you something. I, I don't know if it had something to do with that encounter I had with this Bigfoot that day. And I don't know if this opened up a realm or a portal to me. But ever since that, you take me to any woody area that you want, and I, without a shadow of a doubt, can tell you if there's a Bigfoot in there. I can tell you if this creature has ill intention, and I can tell you if that creature is gentle. Don't ask me how I know that because I don't know. I just know I have been to many wooded areas and I can park my car up on the edge of the woods and I can hear them. I can hear the intention. I can hear the warning. I can hear whatever it is they want you to hear. And if they don't want you there, one thing I know, they'll make it very clear. Don't come in here. It's not safe. Or you might get a real nasty one that might say, you know, just stay out of here. And you can just tell something's not right and something I can only say this going by my intuition on something like that. I would never cross what I heard because I know that if you're being warned, just don't do it. It would not be advisable. I've not been like again, I've never had a bad experience with any of them. But I know from that day of hearing this Bigfoot speak to me inaudibly, without voice, into my head, from that day forward, I've been able to hear when I go to any general area of woods or wherever, I've been able to hear if they wanted to say something. Now, can I understand that, Miguel? No, sir, I cannot. I do not have no explanation to this, but I know I've heard it several times. Again, I've never had a bad experience. I've always listened to what I've been told, and that's either stay out, or it's better that you don't come in here. I mean, I've heard it different ways. And if there's a real gentle one, they'll invite you in. I mean, you may never see them, but I will tell you this: you will definitely hear enough racket and clatter going on, or footsteps going on around you, enough to let you know this is confirmation that I was invited in. And now, to be honest, ever since my experiences when I was younger, I have not, up to this date, I have not seen another Bigfoot, but I have heard them, and I have heard them inaudibly, speak to me. Wasn't a ton, but it was enough where I could tell you without a shadow of a doubt that there's not a set of woods you couldn't take me to and park me at the edge. And before you ever enter in, I could for sure tell you what's in there. Is it good? Is it bad? Does it have good intention? Or is it just protecting its young or its area? I could always do that. I've never told that either. Like I say, you're only second podcast, but I've never told that to anyone because then what people think of as some loon and jumped over the fence, and probably will be a few think that anyway. But I have nothing to prove. Like I said in the beginning of the podcast, anybody that gets on here that tells stories like this and makes that stuff up, I lose all respect for an individual like that. They're dishonest, they take up people's time, and it's wrong to the highest. I don't need that type of attention. It's bad enough that people think you're crazy to tell something like this, let alone going in and making up something. I don't know why anybody would want to make something like that up and draw unnecessary attention to them. My purposes in the beginning was what I said. It was to make people very well aware this is a very real existent thing on planet Earth. And again, like I said, it's therapeutic to me at times because I get these thoughts built up. And after a while, you feel like you've got to release that. And by this means that it really is therapeutic to me in a way of speaking. It helps me to just get it out of me. And it's comforting to be able to do that. So that's why I do what I do here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like Jeremiah was on point when he said you never know if somebody took a shot at one of these creatures, or you never know, like, I don't know, maybe people put out traps. I've had a guest in the past that was putting out animal traps. He was an old trapper, and he ticked these things off, and they would they would take his dogs, they would show up at his house, and they were never happy. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of possibilities there. Maybe they just didn't like the way they looked or how they smelled, or you never know, people get in arguments and maybe they saw something they didn't like. But what exactly happened? What did the neighbors down the road experience?
You know, Miguel, um, other than the Bart Nunley story there, um, I honestly, my grandfather was so private. He, yes, he did converse with his neighbors, the closest ones, like I told you about old man Riddle. And, he'd had many sons and all that. We never really had any conversations with anyone about that type of stuff. I mean, and if there were, I I myself were not aware of them, and I wasn't present. Now, I can tell you this, and I didn't think about this. Again, a good somebody that's got good questions like yourself will draw stuff out of you that you forgot that was there, or might even draw in a memory, which I like that. And you really are good at what you do here, brother, and thank God that you do what you do. Um, Now, when I got older, got up into high school, some of the kids that grew up in that very area where I did, um, now don't get me wrong, we were not, we only had like a few neighbors back then that was lived very close, but we did have a lot of people over the spread it out area in the same. Well, I don't know if you even want to call it a city. Anybody look at this place up on the map can tell you, Zion Bluff City there, it's still super small today. But when we got on school buses back then in the high school, some of the guys back then, I'll never forget, and I never shared my story, but I listened to them a talking, and there was a lot of sightings. Um, I was very quiet. I didn't say much. I, again, I didn't want people on our territory or property back there. trying to hunt down what I considered friendly and as a protector in a way of speaking back then. I never ever spoke out because of that reason. And I mean, even as I'd said before, I even protected this animal when it even came to my grandfather and uncle. Now, even though they found out in their own way something was there, but had they ever heard my story, they'd had a cow. And I'm very serious. They would have had a cow. To be honest, I think if they'd ever heard that story, they might have shipped me back off to my mom and dad, thinking that I was definitely in more of a worse place than what my mom and dad was trying to do to begin with, meaning sending me out of the city of Detroit, Michigan, because it was just crime infested. And what happened was, Miguel, I'll say it so it's not drug out, but at 4 years old, I was on my front porch in Detroit, Michigan, and three men took me off the porch, stole me, took me three or four houses down. They had a trailer that came out on the sidewalk that was parked there. I'm not going to go any further with this story, but they did things to me that I would pray to God would never ever happen to another human being. Um, the miracle of it is I lived through it. They found these men. They served the rest of their life in prison. Um, but I'm sorry. My grandfather, grandmother, my mom and dad come to that conclusion when that incident happened. It was better to send me to be with my grandparents, um, because they just didn't feel safe after that. And that's what caused that. That's why I went from the city to the country. And yeah, that pretty much was why I did that transfer like that.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about that. And I guess my question earlier was I can't remember their names, but you said across the river there was people having encounters
Yeah,
and they were negative ones. Do you know the details on that?
yeah. It's but well, I give you so much. Barton Nunley is his name, and he's very, very well known. He's done huge documentaries. Um, he's I think he's even did a movie or two. Producers that came and he's did this. He has I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but he's got a big YouTube channel and following. But what they called that, and back then, this was so well known, this incident with him, they called it the Spotsville Monster. Okay. The Gleaner, which is Henderson County, Kentucky, is the Henderson Gleaner. I think they're still up and going. That was the newspaper for the town. They even came out and did a huge story on this, and that's where everything just went. Now, to be very honest, these poor people suffered horribly for 1 year straight. This thing came in. If I remembered and heard, it killed mostly all the dogs, um, chickens. I think it got a hold. I'm going by memory on this one now. I think that they said it got a hold of their goats, etc. When they called the game warden and all these people, Barton claims that there was a big government cover up and that they kept telling him, do not call us no more. And if you keep calling the county sheriff, you're just going to be looking for trouble. Well, why would you say such a thing? Um, he's written books on these, very interesting. And when I go back in time and I think about, and when me and him talk, and I mean, it was a pleasure to talk to someone that's that well known. And he's very well known. It was a pleasure to talk to someone. And he said, he says, if you hadn't lived where you lived and had your story, he said, I probably wouldn't have had time. He said, but I got all the time in the world for you. And when he heard my story, he was just blown away. I mean, we literally, the only thing that separated us was that Green River. And, again, I was only, 7 at my time back in 1975. And I mean, I think he might have been the same age, but him and his whole family, and he had a big family apparently, that they were terrorized by this thing every night. And this thing will come up on their property. They seen it multiple times. They had to get bands of people to come in, stand on top of the house, the farmhouse, and wait for that thing to show up. They'd shoot at it with all kinds of shotguns, rifles, but never once hit it. Never once. They said it would come and stand up under they had a barn there. They had a huge light that set out on the front of it, and said this thing would purposely come and get up under that light just to scare them so that they could see. So he would purposely stand under that light so that they could see him. And it was the purpose. They said this thing would beat on their doors and I think their windows and everything on the outside. It got so bad that one night, Barton's dad took his wife and all of his children. They all got, and this thing was beating on the doors on the outside. And they thought it was going to make its way in. They had a huge barrel of kerosene in that room where they were. And Barton's dad had a shotgun. And this thing was so violent with hitting the door, they thought it was actually going to make it through. And Barton's dad told him, he says, I'm going to tell every one of you something. He says, you need to hear me now. He said, if that thing breaks through that door, he says, I'm going to turn this big, huge tank of gas or kerosene over, and I'm going to fire that gun, and I'm going to take all of us up in smoke. He says, because I can't live with the fact that thing would come in and steal one of you, and I'd never see you again. He says, so it's better. And they were very religious people. He said, it's better that we all die together and just go to heaven together than for anything like this to happen and me not see one of you. He says, I couldn't live with myself. And they said it was the scariest night of the whole year. Of course, they had many scary nights, but that one, it brought them to that point to where they honestly was, I don't want to use the word suicidal, but meaning that they were ready to do what they had to do to preserve what they have. And for Barton's dad to say that he just never wanted to live with himself if that thing had came in and took one of the children and ran. He said he'd rather took the whole family out. And I had tried to fathom and think about that. I thought, oh my God. I said, I don't know what I would have done or thought had I been through something like that. But yeah, for a full year, they were forced by this thing to move off the property, and they had to go somewhere else and live. They said the thing would come in the yard every single night and yell. And as we talk about that guttural type of sound, like a woman being killed, and it was horrifying, he said, just absolutely horrifying. And and then me and him shared our stories. He said, oh my God. He says, our stories are totally opposite. He said, but that don't mean nothing to me. He said, because I know that there's good, there's bad. He said, I don't know why what happened to us. He said, I don't know if when we moved there, if we moved into its territory and it just didn't like it. He said, but I will tell you one thing for sure. He said, we found so many dead animals consistently. He said, our dogs, he's everything. He said, we it was nothing come out our front door. He said, and the first thought you had was, where am I going to find my dog, or where am I going to find my goat, or whatever they had, their chickens, where am I going to find it piled up with blood everywhere? And it, he said it was just horrifying. Um, Again, me and him had two totally opposite stories, but we didn't live very far from each other. The only thing that divided us was the Green River. Again, I never met him, never knew about him. Not even his story, as famous as the story was. But going back and thinking, I was only 7 years old. We didn't even get a newspaper. We didn't have a TV, like I said, up until 7 or however many years down the road from that time of my incident. So, there just was no communication. And even as I got older, I never could understand why, after all these years, up until I'm, 56, 57-year old, before I come to find out this man lived that close and he's this famous because of that story. And yet I've never heard that story. The thing that got me one day was I seen a headline that said Spotsville monster. I said, Spotsville? I said, I wonder what state they're calling him. And they said Kentucky. I said, oh my God. I said, I got to see what this is. And that's when I went to pursuing that. And I went to his channel and left a message on his YouTube account. I sort of shared just a little bit and told him about who I was. And when he's seen on the map, I won't leave that address with just anybody, because I don't want people going down there and messing with innocent people that's probably on that property now. It wouldn't be right to nobody. But when I shared it with him though, and when he seen that address, he said, brother, he said, me and you were right across the river from each other. I said, I know we were. I mean, he says, it's just a miracle that we're just hearing after all these years, these stories between us. I said, yeah, it is. But, weird things happen in life.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And what are the odds someone right across the river is having experiences as well, and you didn't know it at the time? That kind of happened with me with my encounters. I got on the BFRO and looked to see if there were any encounters in Missouri. And when I seen some reports 5 minutes down the road, that really blew my mind. And after my encounters, somebody that lives on that specific road put up like a Bigfoot cutout. I'm like, what are the chances of that? And I knew that somewhere in the distance, somebody was having the same experiences as myself. I still don't know, but I wonder about that. And yeah, that sounds like a terrifying experience that they had across the river. And it really does make you wonder if it was the same clan, and if they did something wrong, something that ticked them off. And he said maybe they moved into their territory. It very well could be. And yeah, I hope I never have experiences like that.
Yeah, I can't imagine it. Now, like I said, now remembering in the first of the story here when we started, when I had said, my bedroom in my grandma and grandpa's house was the bedroom window faced the actual road that was in front of the property, which when you looked on the other side of that road, there was a little bit of a cornfield. They didn't grow corn there all the time. I think it was because it flooded at times and they just seen they couldn't do a whole lot with it. But then you had the Green River there. And, like I said, I was so close. We lived so close to that I when there was no leaves on the trees and it was visible, the barges would come through, and I mean, they would see me grab my hand, and as a child, hanging out the window and pulling down, like, honk your horn, and they never missed, and they remembered me. Sometimes they'd even come through, and they'd see me, and I didn't even have to do that. They got so used to it to where they remembered me. And but now, talking about that part of it though, um, being right there on that Green River, like I said, that was my first, I don't know if you want to call it experience or encounter, but that's when I did start seeing movement of some sort of bipedal creature that was very huge. It did not move like anything I'd ever seen. It was quick. That that thing was in and out. Um, Again, I don't know anything when it comes to talking about these Bigfoot. I don't know if they fish by reaching their hands in water for something, like these fish, and eat them. I mean, the thing I've always seen is that they do tend to grab a lot of the livestock and or deer or whatever off of properties. But have I ever heard of them actually fishing? No. Do I believe they would? Yes, I do. And I wondered why they used that Green River route to travel, because it was way more than any 5 or 6 or 7 times I had seen this. It was a lot, because I would see this thing. It usually was late in the evening when I would see this thing traveling. It's like it had its territory, and it's almost like it had a specific time that it would go through, almost like deer. Deer will they have I forget the I don't know if it's 5 years, I mean 5 square miles or 1 square mile, but usually deer will stay within a square mile of a certain territory, and they'll usually run that same route, and usually about the same time of the day you can catch them in that route, if you were to be still and watch and pay attention to their schedule. And that is sort of what I noticed with that, at least that one Bigfoot, or it might have been more than one, but I always seen one at a time though. I never seen more than one at once. But this thing always seemed to travel along that river, and usually kind of more or less around the same time in the evening every day. I'm not going to tell you it was around the very same minute or second. I mean, I'd say within a couple hour range, you know, guessing, from 4 to 6 p.m. in the evening. And back then, we had very good daylight at that hour. Now, like here in Chicago, until they changed the time, you start getting around that time, it's very dark when it starts getting around that time. But then we had very good daylight. So yeah, no, they traveled that river. They really did. And Barton had told me himself that they did travel that river a lot. He said that's where they seen a lot of action. Um, I don't want to leave your I don't want to leave your listeners hanging, but I'm going to say forgive me. Um, Maybe if you want to have me back on your show, I think I might come back in. And I want to pray over it, and I want to think on it. But anybody that could tell you what I'm about to tell you that knows, I don't know why this is, but in some areas, a lot of areas of the world, we don't know why this is, but a lot of times when you talk about people that has had sightings of UFOs or this extraterrestrial world, uh, for some reason, when you go to areas where there's a lot of activity with Bigfoot, there's usually a lot of sightings of the other that will happen in those general areas at times. Now, that's not 100% of everybody's experience or story. Now, I'm going to end up leaving you people hanging. Please forgive me. I'm going to say every one of you, forgive me. You got to give me a little time because I've never broke this story. But I'm going to just go to the surface. That's it. But me and the conversation Mr. Nunley, Barton Nunley had, one thing he brought up to me is that there was a lot of UFO sighting that was known to have come up out of that Green River. Now, notice what I said. They were seen coming up out from under the river. And then they would take off like lightning. I don't talk about this story because I've just got very, very deep personal beliefs and reasons for what I'm saying here. And until I can actually get myself comfortable enough to do this, I have to leave it to where I'm going to take it. But I will tell you this. In the same year with the Bigfoot encounters, had a very powerful encounter with the UFO that touched down in that same, now watch what I'm telling you, that touched down by that pond where I almost drowned it. Also, wasn't very far from where that horse threw me. I had a very powerful encounter one night with a UFO in that area. In the middle of the night, as young as I was, there was we had some this is what scared my grandfather. He thought the government was going to come on our property and take us away or whatever. He was scared they were going to come get me. Because he told us, he said, for the rest of your life, never speak about what we've seen here. There were several times at night. I don't mean something like every day or every week. No. Miguel, I've got a guess on this, but I would almost bet you that my guess is going to be close. I would say 4 to 5 encounters for sure, where there was something that would show up in the very dead middle of the night. It never showed up in the day. Would hover up over our farmhouse. It usually was about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Don't ask me why that time. The lights was so overwhelming. It lit up every window, every door, everything on the farmhouse. The power surge of this thing was overwhelming. You could tell there was something that was bigger than you and life itself that would sit there for, it didn't stay long, but it would come, would sit. It would scare every one of us in the house, almost to the point it caused you to want to run and hide in a closet, under a bed. Wherever you were looking for something to take cover, because I don't want to say it was, I don't know how to say this. It's like the sound or the vibration. I think the vibration's more of a word I want to use, because I really didn't hear like a sound, but the vibration, the power of this thing that was coming out of it when it would hover or sit, and this is the thing, we did not get to see the physical part of this. All I can tell you is what I'm telling you here is that something, it was huge, and I mean very huge, would set up on over the top of the house and hover. We would get the powerful lights off of it that would emanate. I mean, every window. It did not miss one crack or crevice in that house. And if you'd had a hole in that roof, it showed it at that time. That's how powerful this lighting was. This thing happened in the same year I had my encounter with Sasquatch. Now, I'm going to take this to this last place here. And if for some reason, Miguel, you want to invite me back on and maybe talk more about it, whatever. I don't know how much more I can really give, but this is what happened. I noticed right after my encounter with Sasquatch, again, I think that this opened up a portal or some sort of a dimension to me that day that I still today do not understand. But right after my encounter, I started having all of these weird dreams. I could hear something, I don't know what that was, that would call my voice out in the middle of the night while I was asleep and would speak to me. It wouldn't say much. It would just call my name out. Well, one night, at my young age, all I can remember is my name was called out. This voice told me and I will tell you, and I know this to be facts. I became under a very deep hypnotic state. The voice spoke to me in my dream state, and then when I come out of the dream state to the waking state, I was still, though, in this hypnotic state, but yet I can clearly remember the commands in the voice. And this thing spoke to me and said, get up out of your bed, walk back into the field, and go next to the pond and stand there. And we will meet with you. Okay. Miguel, this is as far as I'm going to take it, but my grandfather, I had a bit of a memory loss at that point for a moment. My grandfather, grandmother, my uncle went crazy. They noticed I was missing out of my bed. Man, brother, they were not my grandfather, because I've told you, I only seen tears out of his eyes once. But my grandmother, my uncle was crying like none other. They had flashlights out in the middle of the night looking, trying to figure out where I went to. They thought somebody came through the window and stole me or something. And my grandfather, he said, I don't know why. He said that he's not in the corn crib. He's not over there where we keep the pigs. He's not over there anywhere. He said, I got this feeling and I don't know why. He said, we need to go back towards the pond. I really feel the man had an intuition. I feel like something spoke to him in a way he probably didn't know. They went back into that field. And what they found was me in a hypnotic state with my eyes focused into the air. Now, this is where I'll pause and, well, I don't know about pause, but kind of end the story.
Oh
I
man.
100%,
Yeah. I definitely want to hear
100%,
the rest of it.
I seen an absolute UFO sitting on the ground beside the pond where I was told to go. But the rest of that, what happened, what were they wanting, what did they do, Miguel, I don't know. But I seen it. And by the time my grandparents and them got there, it was gone. They seen me in this hypnotic state with my eyes focused into the air. And they said that they didn't know what to think or what to do. They were so scared. And they said that I literally was frozen in this position. They tried talking to me. They tried everything, shaking, not shaking in a bad way, trying to shake me a little bit, trying to get me to come to my senses, and said that my grandfather grabbed me, put me up on his shoulder so that they could get me out of there. Said, but I remained in that same position with my eyes focused up into the air until they actually got me back to the house. And that's a pretty good little walk. And said, then I started snapping out of it. My grandfather sat down with me and the family. He said, you are to never, 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 as long as we live as a family, ever mention this story to no one. He said, if you do, he said, I couldn't live with the fact that the government or somebody would come here and take you away from us and we'd never see you again. He said, he says, this is a rule. He says, I will be very upset. He says, I will get not violent, but nasty, and I'll pull a belt out. And he says, I will wear you out to the point you'll wish you never open your mouth ever. And I tell you something, when I seen the look of my granddaddy's eyes that day, I knew you'd better never open. In getting into adult area, I knew as long as that man lived, I'd never better open my mouth. He was a very serious man. And if he told you he was going to do something, you trust me, it was as good as money in the bank. That was not a man that lied. It was not a man that returned back on his word when he told you something. He was one of the older ones that they believed back in the day. If they went to a bank, they didn't have to sign papers. I mean, we're talking about way back. They made a verbal agreement, and that verbal agreement was met. The man never did do many loans back ever that I ever knew. But I'm telling you, the banks trusted him so well that he could make a verbal agreement with any bank, and they trusted him that well. And I knew that day when that man told me that and sat with me and the family, don't you ever, ever. He said, forget this ever happened. Get it out of your head. Do what you got to do. But I don't even want it mentioned in our family talks, even if it's just us. He said, I don't want to know nothing about it. I don't want to know nothing. He said, because if I'm ever approached and asked, he says, I can be truthful and say, I know nothing. Because if you tell me nothing, then I can't lie. And that conversation laid there from that day forth. Now, Miguel, sorry, I can't go much further than that.
Yeah. Did you pretty much tell me everything?
There was more, but that part I don't even think I would tell anyone at this hour.
Okay. You can tell me that off air
yeah, I could. Yeah.
if you want to.
I could, yeah.
Okay.
Off
Well,
air, absolutely. I'll share with you off air. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, and I feel the same. Where I had my encounters, there was strange UFOs floating over the property. Not the same day that I encountered Bigfoot or had experiences, but in that same time frame, the same area. I don't know if there's a connection, but I feel like these things are coming in and out of portals. And we both had a Skinwalker Ranch situation happening on the property.
Oh yes. Wow. Oh, that. Yeah. I don't. I don't know truthfully if these entities are connected and work for the working the same assisting each other or what. That I can't. I honestly don't have no wisdom on that.
Hmm.
I just know that I've heard over and over from documentaries or whatever that a lot of people have said they believe that these two things kind of run hand in hand. That usually you'll see them in the same area or manifestations in the same area. Talking about orbs, I didn't think about that, brother. I'll give this as the last. When I seen what I considered that UFO, there was thousands and thousands of orbs all around that craft, out in the field, over the water, everywhere. I do not know what that is. It's a phenomenon I can't even understand. Listen, I've got pictures to prove to you that in my day now of ministry, those orbs show up in pictures while I'm ministering to people. I've got pictures of this. And people are like, well, that's something off of the camera lens or this or that. I say, okay, I'll let you think what you want and let you believe what you want. But I've had people, professionals that looked at this. He said that is not AI because this was way, way before AI ever existed. He said, I looked at that thing and opened it up and defined it. He said, brother, there's code. There's some type of code embedded inside those orbs. He said, you got some of the best picture I ever seen. He said, but what is it? I don't know. He said, even with the highest tech stuff I've got, he said, I still could not understand what was embedded in there. He said, it looked like some sort of code or something. He said, it's just weird. And I said, yeah, I know. And I better shut up from there.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And the orbs are also associated with cryptid activity. So there's another connection. But yeah, we're running out of time. Ray, I
Yep.
appreciate you for contacting me and sharing all these experiences and encounters with me on the channel. And they were truly phenomenal. And I definitely believe you 110%. Like you're as real as they get.
Thank you, Miguel. And, and again, I never try to make anybody. I'm not here to make anybody believe anything. I mean, everybody's got their opinions on anything. Again, I'm not here to make anyone a believer. I was just simply here to tell a story. But it is the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And I am a minister of God. And one thing I do not believe in is dishonesty. Or straight up lying to people. And I feel like there's many other lies a person could tell to get attention about something besides something like this. So thank you, Miguel, so much for having me on your show. I hope that you get some good feedback. I hope that this helps your channel. Um, I'll do anything I can to help you, brother, because you're genuine, you're down to earth, and you're 100% the real deal. Thank you for having me on today.
I appreciate you and thank you for everything that you did.
You're welcome. God bless you. You take good care of yourself.
Yeah, God bless you, and you take care, right? Okay.
All righty.
All right. Bye. All right, Ray, thank you very much for sharing your Bigfoot encounters and experiences with me here on Sasquatch Theory, and they were truly amazing. The female Sasquatch definitely had love and compassion, and she was very concerned about you. It makes me feel like she had been watching you for quite some time, and I think she'd come accustomed to you. Like, she knew who you were, and she had watched you grow up on that farm, and she wasn't going to stand by and watch something bad happen to you. And maybe she lost a little one when a long time ago, and you were kind of her kid from a distance. And yeah, that's amazing. The spacing between the toes is very interesting. I think Jeff Meldrum, if he was still around, he would have found that detail to be very, very fascinating. And I feel like that's so they can grab onto trees with their feet, or possibly an injury. I'm not sure, but Jeff Meldrum definitely would have had a lot to say about that. And yeah, the tracks that were found in the hog pen, that is spooky. These things started stealing hogs, and maybe that's what happened across the river to that family. Maybe they were stealing their animals and they shot at these things. And from what you told me, they were taking the dogs and killing the livestock. So I feel like maybe there's more to that story. And yeah, the twist at the end, that really got me. This UFO at the pond, and you found yourself at the pond, the same spot where you got saved by Sasquatch. That is definitely interesting. And the UFOs were hovering over the house, and the strange lights that the UFOs were emitting, that is weird. And you said there were a bunch of orbs. That's strange, because when I experience Bigfoot activity, a lot of times I'm seeing these orbs. I can't help but feel that there is a connection. I've experienced the same thing. I've had a gray alien in my room when I was a teenager, and that same property, I ended up having Bigfoot experiences. And I don't feel like it's a coincidence. I really don't. But I know a lot of people will be skeptical, but people have done research on this at the Skinwalker Ranch, and many other people have talked about it. Why are they testing humans? What are the experiments for? They obviously are creating something. So keep an open mind. If Bigfoot exists, so do aliens. Yeah, get used to it. If you have a Bigfoot encounter you would like to share with me here on Sasquatch Theory, feel free to reach out sometime at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. With all that being said, you guys be safe out in the woods.